This week, we discuss supporting a PCOS client navigating the frustration with both laser and electrolysis, exploring the hormonal management, and collaboration with dermatology and client support. I know that we had a pretty solid PCOS and laser question come through, and Joanie and I did a bit of collaboration in how to help you guys understand the answer to this. And part of this conversation is going to be, I will be hitting on our laser and electrolysis talk in a couple weeks. And then the other part of it is from the PCOS talk I did back in September. So the first thing out the gate with this is Joanne's going to read off the question, and then we'll start going kind of back and forth between the two, is that a lot of what this is easily 4 hours worth of an answer. And we're giving you guys mentorship hour style, which is like little snippets, so that you guys can see how much you need to invest in your education further from there, which of course we want you to. But it really does help you guys kind of fortify the information you're hearing tonight. So Joanie, without further ado.
Okay. So the question is more of like there's a story in there. So let's just kind of put on a little listening ears. Okay, so I have a client with PCOS who has been through quite the journey with hair removal. She initially tried laser, did a lot of plucking, but neither gave her the results she hoped for. We're now at about 30 hours of electrolysis working together. She's convinced that laser made things worse. It seems like she grew even more hair after those treatments. She feels really disillusioned, especially after the experience with a big chain like Laser Away. Recently, she was at Stanford for a doctor's appointment, and they suggested she try laser again, this time using their technology rather than the equipment from the chain. She's Persian with olive skin, and Stanford believes that their laser is better suited for her. After everything, she feels so frustrated. Despite the significant reduction we've achieved, she still feels like new hairs keep appearing on the chin, and progress is there, but it's not enough in her eyes. She's also not on any medication at the moment, though she knows that there are options out there. She just hasn't really wanted to go down that path yet. She's now left wondering, could Stanford's lasers really be the right solution for her? We're both feeling a bit wary. It's hard to trust when past experiences haven't lived up to expectations, but maybe this is a chance worth considering. And so this is where we kind of take over, and let's just kind of talk about the situation a bit.
So one of the big things that is kind of a takeaway that I first think about is that we need to understand PCOS and hair growth, because PCOS is very much, it is a driving force in the hair growth that people face because of that hormonal imbalance, which leads to like elevated androgen levels, which our hairs are androgen sensitive. And what ends up happening is you create a bigger problem over time because those sensitive hairs are stimulated through outside means. Now, whether the person is doing laser or electrolysis, there is going to be a fight when stuff is not performed correctly. And this is where I get, and you guys will hear me a little bit in this space because I believe in both. I want you to hear that I'm giving you a scientific side of this and an unbiased in the sense of like, both camps have a purpose, but there are going to be some things that as I talk about this tonight, I did some research while we were chatting away about like what lasers that she was probably using. And I did not find what Stanford's using. So I'm going to pause on like that portion of it. But laser or electrolysis, the both of them are going to address the problem. The bigger issue that we're going to face here, and the reason that she most likely had stimulation of growth, was technology used and mixed with not the right balance of spot size to energy usage to areas treated. So there wasn't enough target in these zones to get us to that point. Because of those androgen sensitive hairs, if I go over even the lightest of brown hair, knowing that a laser can see brown, I have the potential to stimulate that growth because my stem cells are already like overactive in that area. My androgen levels are already heightened in that space. And so, yes, you can get that stimulation. Where I will say is improperly done electrolysis also can do this, but the scale in which it does is vastly different. And that is the bigger issue here, is that she had someone that utilized a tool, most likely when she was having laser, that was not fit for her. And they did not do enough assessment of this area. So that's going to be like the starting point of this. And I want you guys to like take those little nuggets, and we'll come back to this. But Joanie, like when we were chatting, I know that you were saying about like the progress.
As far as like the electrolysis progress is, obviously I would want to be asking a couple more questions as far as what 30 hours really means, you know? So is 30 hours, you know, thermolysis versus blend is going to be a little different. But even if we put that aside, that is not even the most important part. How long are we talking about with these 30 hours, right? So is it just 30 hours over the first 3 to 4 months because we just have so much work to do? Or is it spread out over 6 months or 9 months? And so the full time frame is also going to be important. And then I would want to know, is this client getting cleared of all the hairs that are concerning every time that they're coming in, right? So there's a lot of different, I don't want to say facets, but different little things that I would want to know in order to know if the treatment plan was adapted properly. Now, it was mentioned that there has been results that are being seen, and maybe this client is, you know, sometimes, and you know this, when they come after having plucked for years and laser and shaving and all the different things, you know, under the sky, they come with a kind of an impatience to be done. And unfortunately, electrolysis is not something you can be impatient about. So at what point is this client ready to throw in the towel? You know, has it been 6 months and she's seeing good results, but she's already kind of getting impatient with this and ready to jump ship to something else? If it's working and it's explained how long this takes, you know, she's halfway there. She just needs to stick with it. So I don't know if the conversation's not getting across, but I understand that sometimes, you know, even if you say over and over and over again that, you know, it's working, it just takes time. They come in with this impatience because they've just tried so many things and nothing's worked. And so, you know, like is this just one more thing that they're wasting their time and money on, type of thing. So
A couple comments in the chat that I think are really important from one of our fellow educators on the East Coast, Michaela, and she was saying, like, how often were the laser treatments, how often were they done? And how many of the total treatments did she have? Those are fantastic.
isn't laser away like once a month? Like
Yeah.
they're very frequent.
It's yeah. And so and I'll kind of go over that in a second.
We'll talk about the laser portion too.
Because that's going to be part of kind of like my next thought process here. But like, and then Michaela says like, what laser was used, Alex, diode, et cetera. Like and that's like when I was doing my research earlier, that's why I think that this is an important conversation to have, because they're using multiple wavelengths at laser away. And
an IPL?
So when I was looking them up, okay, types of lasers used for laser hair removal, common brand names, they're talking about the most here, and they're not saying that these are what they have in their clinic. They're saying, but for them to highlight these names, I think that that's important here. So Alexandrite laser, they're talking about Candela Genelaise. Those are like Genelaise Plus, Genel Max Pro, Cynosure, Apogee, and EpiTouch Plus are the Alexandrites that are most commonly used for hair removal. Common brand names for ruby lasers. I'm not a fan of rubies, especially for somebody who has olive complexion. But Palomar E2000 and the Ruby Star. The reason I'm not a big fan of ruby is years ago, when we first started doing laser and my mom first got trained in laser, she was testing out lasers and ruby was kind of a go-to. And she ended up with because the head of it is square, she ended up with a sizable square blister on her calf for years, and she had to do some corrective stuff to it. I honestly would. I'm gonna see her next week. I'm gonna see if she still has like a hint of it there, because I'm curious. I haven't looked at it in a long time. And then you have like diode. Diode. We see this a lot, like within Um, Cineron Candela had the motif, which was their diode. The reason I did like the diode in cases like this one is because the motif had an RF coupling on either side of the diode's crystal. And so what that does is the light is attracted obviously to the pigment of that hair, but then we interrupt that with RF. So you're basically taking a crystal, because of laser, mixed with radio frequency, electrolysis. And it does do great things with accelerated vellus dark hair. Okay. Now, saying that, it takes a lot of skill to get there. In most places like this that have monthly memberships, they're great for starting technicians. They are not the ones that you usually get high yield results from. It's kind of like going to like when you first like Great Clips is still going to give you a haircut and still to give you a good haircut, but sometimes you get someone at Great Clips that's not so great, right? And that's like I feel bad because somebody's going to get mad at me like online and say, "Oh, Stephanie is talking trash about these," and I'm not necessarily. It is the model in which you create in this space that allows these technicians to grow their skill, but they're
They start somewhere.
got to start somewhere. And so that is the big thing. So the light shear is a diode that's really common. The SLP 1000 laser light and the Soprano XL, those are going to be some of the most common ones outside of the motif. I haven't gotten to play with those as much. And I will say there's a new diode that out of Chicago, and my laser trainer, Lorenzo Coons, he has been talking about this one that is a stackable wavelength. And I think this is a very cool feature where they are now able to take the 808 and bring it to a 1064 and a 755. And that's amazing to have. It kind of reminds me how my Evolution X is doing the same thing where it's taking you into different megahertz. We're seeing this with the new technology. I hope to see that grow. I hope to see long-term results from that because I do think that there's something to that. But it's such a new technology that you're not going to have a lot of years of like tried and true progress.
Sure.
And then the ND YAG laser, that is what I would say for a large percentage of the names on our call because I know, what these zappers look like. I would say that an ND YAG is going to be a really great tool for anybody my skin type or darker. And in saying that, I got the majority of my hair taken care of early on with a YAG. And then as I lightened up and stopped going in the sun as much, I started taking care of my skin with sunblock because I was no longer a teenager who sat out by the pool all the time. Now I was an adult who didn't want to wrinkle. I started lightening up over time. And I was able to start using Alex to still yield good results for me. But initially, when we think about that contrast of color, that becomes problematic. So those are going to be the ones that they really they talked about the most in here. Now, what I see in their pictures is it looks like they're using an Alex or a YAG. The hand pieces look very similar. And you can't tell what wavelength they're firing at unless you see the front of their machine. So it looks like they're using either a combo of the two where it can go back and forth like the General Max Pro does, or they're using a one or the other. And so that being said, when we talk about the technology, like the complementary technology of doing laser, had she had enough density, volume, and color present in a given area, not going into the adjacent areas, she probably could still have a really good treatment. And I will say that if you feel like you're always drowning in hair follicles and you're trying to play catch up, laser is a good tool to forcibly put stuff into the anagen phase and give you, like when you can't get to a certain zone, it's a good purge of that old stuff so that as you have the younger stuff come back through, it becomes easier to break it down. And because it is excited growth, you will be playing a little bit of catch up for a while. So with thinking about the things that are takeaways from that is like her previous experiences with laser likely failed because of that inappropriate technology to what she has, right? Hearing the background of her story, hearing that, so yes, there's a question in here from Emily. Does laser treatment kill the stem cells, the germinative cells? Yeah. I mean, basically what you're doing is you're creating cauterization in there just like you do with AC current. So I would say that yes, it does. It does it differently, but it is a very efficient tool in killing those germinative cells as well. And that's because your hair acts as the perfect filament, no matter what stage it's in, when doing laser. It is relying on the accuracy of the technician's knowledge of balancing energy, but not the accuracy of an insertion. So failure happens on both sides, right? So when we think about the failure of laser is like, did you do the right technology for the case in front of you? Okay. Failure of electrolysis is, did you get that filament in the follicle where you needed it to get to and balanced out enough of that energy so that you don't damage the skin, but you create cauterization and chemical change within that follicle because of your accurate insertion. So you can have fail on both sides. We see it all the time when people are asking, like, why do I still have hair online on the public forums? And it's because one of those things didn't happen. And so that happens here. I will say that pretty much all lasers are ineffective for fine and light hair. Okay. Light being the primary and then fine being the secondary. If you had fine hair but lots of volume so that light is now attracted to that area, could you break it down with a laser? Yes, if you're able to reduce your spot size and increase your intensity of your joules to the point where you are creating a very superficial laser penetration depth, and it can happen. But you got to be careful because most of the patients are not following protocol. And so by bringing that energy up in the follicle, that means that you're closer to where the melanin is sitting in the skin versus targeting the melanin of the hair. And now we have a higher chance of having an adverse reaction to the skin. So I wouldn't, like, when I see somebody, the minute I see that there is not enough color or not enough volume present, we're not doing it. And we've thrown out the old adage of like skin color being an issue because now we have wavelengths that can treat all Fitzpatricks. So like if you're like, oh, it doesn't work on darker skin, it does when you do the right technology. This episode is brought to you by MEEC, the Maryland Electrolysis Education Center. MEEC is committed to providing comprehensive training and continued education for electrologists at every stage of their career. Find out more about their programs at mdelectrolysiseducation.com.
I'm always thinking, she's already started this whole treatment plan with electrolysis, and we know that it will be successful,
Yeah.
So it's like treated by somebody that knows what they're doing. She will get to the end point, and it's like already she is seeing progress.
Right.
So why stop this to go and roll the dice with a new facility? And, you don't know if they're technicians just because sometimes like it's a doctor's office, it's Stanford, and you think like, oh, they must know what they're talking about. But we know that like it depends, right? So you might have the best laser in the world. Doesn't mean that the person who's operating it knows what they're doing.
Well, we talked
So,
about that on Sunday when we were talking about the skin healing.
yeah.
Doctors are buying machines all the time
Yeah.
in any state because they don't necessarily have to go to school like we do. And they are calling themselves professionals in this line of work without having the training. The same thing happened with laser. Unfortunately, that was a big thing that happened in the early 2000s is we accidentally lobbied so hard against laser in certain states that electrologists who are the perfect people to fire a laser were no longer able to access that technology. And that obviously led to the downfall of a lot of practitioners because they weren't able to complement their practice or partner with people because there was such a divide. These medical providers when they come in and they're like, oh yeah, I can do this, no big deal. And they do a day training on a laser. What they're learning how to do in that day training is not how to kill a hair. They're learning how to fire the laser safely. The problem with places like, and this is where I was going to come back to this portion of it, like a chain style membership hair removal place, okay, is going after volume of members, not results. Okay. And it's the business model, and that's their business model. And it's frustrating as a technician to see that. But when we're dealing with someone that is like, oh yeah, I can do this, and then has no training on how to target the stem cells, the germinative cells, or understand how thermal relaxation time, or here we're talking about pulse duration. Kayla's coming at me with the hot questions tonight. I love this. But one of the things here is like, yeah, I mean, if you're not factoring in the thermal relaxation time of the skin, if you're not factoring in what energy megahertz or wavelength to work with, you you should be just kind of like throwing out all your education if you're not factoring all that in, because at that point, you know how to fire the laser safely. Okay. And by safely, what that means, and when we talk about this in a couple weeks in the laser class, as we change our spot size, we change how many pulses we do in a session. Okay. Is obviously an 8 millimeter spot size is a lot smaller than 18 millimeter spot size. Now they have larger ones than that. But in a place like this, everything that they're firing on is an 18 millimeter spot size, even if it's an upper lip, which if you think an 18 millimeter spot size is the size of a quarter, okay? So unless I'm really stretching out that lip, I'm not necessarily getting everything taken care of and targeted correctly. So they go in there and they're like, hey, it takes you 5 minutes to do a laser on your upper lip. I want to, or not even, it's like a minute. But I want you done in 5 minutes so we can get another person in your schedule. They're looking at that at volume. They're not looking at that as proper balancing of that information. Now, the thing that made me a little nervous is hearing that, oh, she went to Stanford and they were like, oh, try our laser. Why is she inquiring about going back to laser in that space? Like, why was that conversation brought up? Because part of the thing that was in the initial question was she was saying something about she doesn't want to take the pathways of medically managing her PCOS. And so guess exactly what's going to happen if you're not taking care of your elevated androgen levels. You're going to be chasing all those potential hairs that maybe were just a little stimulated by a laser treatment or just a little bit problematic, and we're now going to be going after that. And she's going to feel like that 30 hours that they spent feels like an eternity. Yeah. It's like pennies in a bucket. So Stanford's recommendation, I would like to know, this is me being like nosy McNoserson, is like, I want to know, why did we ask Stanford about using their laser when we already have a solution that is working? It's just working slower.
Yeah, but from the question, she seemed to be losing patience with it.
Yeah.
So even though it seems to be progressing, it wasn't going fast enough for her.
Yeah. Well, but that's the thing is like the patient is, when you go to your doctor and you're like, what about your laser? You just
chasing a quick fix, it's
an
unfortunate part of this field. People have a hard time committing to a treatment plan because they want it to be quick, and so the minute there's like a new cream that promises permanent hair removal or home lasers or whatever it is, they're all for spending hundreds of dollars on all these different things that just end up being trash.
Yes.
As opposed to, committing to a solution that works. But that's human nature, right? Talking about diet fads and whatever else, people are always looking for the quick fix for things.
Oh my, absolutely. I'm going to share my screen with you guys that are on the call so you can see the slides I'm going to be talking about. For those that listen in later, that's one of those things where
I did put into the chat, by the way, the home study for the PCOS class that we did, which was amazing. So if you're kind of curious about all things PCOS, the medicines that they might be on, and all these different things, it's very comprehensive.
And just so everybody knows, there's a broken link in there that I'm fixing tomorrow for the guidelines. I can drop the link into our chat here when we're all done as well, and fix it that way. I think I might actually have the guidelines as a QR code on the screen, but if you're using your device, it doesn't really matter. Now, okay, so lowering androgens, how are we doing this? We're going to go over 3 different slides here. So they're going to do a possibility of doing hormonal contraceptives. Not everybody is able to do that, depending on what's going on with their body. But those are the easiest tic-tac style medication that doctors give out like it's going out of style. Okay. I will say that I notice that the progesterone-only pills are used more often than the estrogen-based ones. And I will say that the progesterone-based ones tend to help with additional items like cystic acne, the hirsutism. It will help reduce that as well. But it does lead to a little bit of increased weight gain, and then tenderness in the breast. And that's usually only when you first start it. But if you're cycling on and off, so like an IUD is consistent where you have that sensitivity initially, but you're not usually having that cyclically throughout the process. Where a pill, you have your 21 days and then your placebo days. You're going to notice when you pop back off of the placebo one, which you should be doing that. Not having a cycle is not good for someone that has menses. In the big picture, when you are of age to have it, you need to shed your lining. Okay. But pause on that. Understand that in that shedding of the lining, when you pop back into your progesterone pill again, you're probably going to have tenderness again. And it's just kind of like that weird cycle that happens. Anti-androgens, this is one of the biggest things that we see our PCOS patients use. It does substantially dry out the follicle.
Spironolactone is all over their intake forms for sure.
Oh my gosh, Spiro is like, I've been taking Spiro since I got diagnosed when I was 18. So I mean, like a long time. I'm 21 years now. And then finasteride is not going to help necessarily with facial hair, but if they're losing hair on top of their head during this time, finasteride is going to help fortify that. Insulin sensitizers, so metformin, but we're also seeing a lot of success with GLP-1s as well. So GLP-1 would be like Ozempic, Mounjaro. There's like so many different
Tirzepatide, something.
Tirzepatide, yeah. Semaglutide, any of the tides at the end, they all really help a lot. And we are seeing, I can't wait for doctors to realize how much it's benefiting PCOS patients, because I would love to see this as like an included medication for people. Because metformin, it takes the edge off, but it helps more with those assigned male at birth than assigned female at birth with androgens, with their insulin levels. It has a nice stopping point, and it does have both of those have a lot of gastric distress. So if a patient is worried about like being constipated or having diarrhea, those are going to be like 2 possibilities with these 2 medications, especially when they first start them, or if there's a shift in the medication. Then you have your GnRH, and then I would say these ones are going to be like used most when they're suppressing the ovarian hormone production. They're used in specific situations. It is not something that most doctors are prescribing unless there is something else going on. Topical treatments, Vanica or Vaniqua, I don't know how people are actually supposed to say it. I feel like I sound like I'm Vaniqua, like Boricua. Like it's one of those things. Like I just think that I don't like it. I don't like it for my patients. It's like utilizing a laser that doesn't necessarily work for you. It's a Band-Aid for the moment, but the minute you stop doing it, the resurgence happens. And then clomiphene, I think is how you say that, citrate. These are used a lot for the patients that are trying to conceive. So if their ovulation is irregular, they're going to have to like look at this one. And then they need to be able to make sure that they're not doing this without medical help. Sometimes people will go like over the border, which I mean, that's a thing. But you're not a pharmacist and or a doctor, and knowing what you should be prescribed is not necessarily your strong suit unless it's in your scope. So make sure that you're being monitored by a professional that knows the medications. Make sure that you're consulting both your electrologist, your laser technician, and your doctor about shifts that you're seeing within this growth, you should be keeping track of it. And I would say that any of these androgen sensitive medications, just like when you're working in gender affirming care, it is not when you first start taking HRT, spironolactone, finasteride, that you're going to see the results. It's usually once you've hit a full growth cycle on the medication. So usually the delay or the slowing of the growth, the delay in the amount of hair growth on the body or removal of that hair growth is going to happen if it's a 4-month growth
Minimum
cycle.
3 months,
Minimum. Yeah. It's like
but
you're going to
6
have
months
to,
more realistic.
yeah. And that's just going to be after that medication kind of kicking up a notch. So those are the biggest things that are just important to know. There are also medications that she should know that cause hypertrichosis. So paradoxical hypertrichosis and hypertrichosis are a little bit different because paradoxical is caused by something where hypertrichosis is usually caused because you were hairy naturally. So like Mediterranean, Middle Eastern, South Asian, these are going to be individuals that have a higher chance of hypertrichosis. There are medications that in this space that will make it worse. So minoxidil is often used for patients with PCOS, uh, for hair loss. Corticosteroids, we saw a lot post-COVID when people were trying to heal their long COVID. All of a sudden, anabolic steroids, we're seeing that a lot with in weight loss community when it comes to like bodybuilding, because it gets pushed to people a lot in those spaces. The other ones, I'm not going to go through and say all those names. If anybody else wants to go and butcher them, they totally can. But I'm not doing that on the fly right now. But I will say that they all have like the hypoglycemia. That's very common with people that have heart issues and that kind of stuff as well. Sugar issues in those spaces. We're seeing a lot of issues with the immunosuppressants. They're causing hair growth and hair changes. The immunosuppressants, sometimes you'll see a shift in how the hair grows in, which is kind of a cool, weird thing. The seizure medications, the anticonvulsants, they tend to possibly have stimulation, and then any hormonal treatments that are meant to increase your androgen levels and testosterone levels will impact that as well. So those were just some of the ones I wanted to like kind of bring up when it came to like the medication side of things, because I really do think that like there is stuff that when I heard that question, I was like, well, I mean, like she really has not given herself a medical chance. So far, she's only done um, physical treatments. And that's kind of a red flag to me, because it means that you're trying to take care of a symptom, but you're not trying to get to the root cause of it. And our job gets so much better when we have the root cause met.
Yeah, I mean, as the electrologist who's taking on this case, it sounds like she's kind of got her work cut out for her because she's got an issue that was definitely made worse by all the different things that she's tried, and she's not also taking the proper steps to make sure to try to help herself in this case also. But maybe the appointment to Stanford was, an appointment for the PCOS. That wasn't really specified. But at the same time, maybe that's also why the conversation of the laser did come up.
Right.
So, we don't know. Like maybe she is, but it sounds like it might be, it's scary sometimes to think about all these medicines and taking it every day. I know I'm not a fan of having to take something every single day. I never was. So
I
it can be kind of scary.
This last year with like perimenopause hitting and my PCOS being a struggle the last few years, this is the first time I've had to take like multiple medications for like different symptoms within my PCOS. And I was like, oh my God, I'm on all these medications now. And my doc's like, that's nothing. And I'm like, I don't
Yeah,
want
so people they come with like the baggie full of like the all the pill bags, and everything
to.
like that.
Yeah, and I get it.
Yeah.
I happily take it because this is the best I've felt in a long time. I mean, it's even better than when I was bodybuilding and I was like super skinny. Like people thought, oh, you got to feel great. No, I was tired. I felt
Yeah.
really bad. My cortisol levels were like horrible. But at least I was skinny. Like that was kind of that moment, right? And so, like I was putting up with it because my motivation was not in the right spot. Right. It wasn't like healing my total body. It was in getting a different look on my body. So, um, what do you think that what would you do? it's like a collaboration portion of it. Like, what would you talk to Stanford, talk to the patient? Like, what would be this?
I would keep my conversation with the patient. I don't know that I would go waste my time trying to reach out to Sanford and her doctor and all this and that because I feel like maybe, and it's like a little bit pessimistic, but I feel like they've kind of got their minds made up as to what electrolysis is and, and what they think that they know and how they want to address it. I do my best to educate my clients and, hopefully they trust me in this and in what I do. But I also believe in autonomy. So if this client decides that, she wants to give Stanford a go, then I would say, you do what you do, but then deal with the consequences, and then maybe I'll see you in a year. Who knows? So
I have that same feeling. I would. I'm here to be your cheerleader, and your motivator, and give you accurate information. Um, but I also understand that I've had that hair problem myself, and I took care of a lot of it with laser, and I took care of a lot of it with electrolysis, on my face at least. And like, I'm happy with what I did, but I know that what I did was unusual because I live in a hair removal family,
Mhm.
and I probably had more hair removal than normal people, like normal, whatever
Yeah.
that.
Well, you
Uh,
had access to it, so that sure made it easier, right?
Absolutely. So, I like to think of the combination treatment plans as a possible go-to. I would definitely say in a couple weeks when we do the laser lecture, you guys are going to see how I do a lot of my building a treatment plan when it comes to collaborating with an electrologist. I'm going to use like an example of like me and Joanie, like even though we're both electrologists and laser trained, I'm going to act as I'm like the laser technician and she's the electrologist. I would look at this as if she's going to be having both, then I would start ground zero as a laser treatment after we've done test pulses to see what our working point should be at the time of consult. And I would have her at the time of consult do test pulses and get on an SPF as a starting point. See her a week later, just to make sure there's no adverse reaction. With her being Mediterranean, I would possibly go 2 weeks. So I have at least 2 weeks of SPF on board. And then I would laser what was laserable, and I would leave the rest for Joanie. And then I would say Joanie would build her treatment plan based off of the hair she sees left over. And that's what you staircase from on your side.
I had a case like that. It was a client. Like we did her whole face, but she wanted to get laser, and it was mainly on the nape of her neck. Like the dark hairs that come from the back of her head, kind of to the side of her neck. And so she was telling me about it, and I said, "Okay." I said, if you go and do that, do not let them go to the front of your throat. I said the stuff that's fine right here. I was like, that's electrolysis. Do not touch that. So they can get the thick stuff back there, but like as soon as they start going down the front of the neck and this area here, it becomes a mess. I said, that's electrolysis. Do not let them veer away from the area that's super, super dark. You want to go that route. I'm all for it as far as, supporting them in it. I could easily do it with electrolysis. And I feel like we would save time too. Because once we get through the clearing, after that, we're on the same kind of time frame as far as like a year of laser or a year of electrolysis. Both will get you to the same point. But, again, they want it to be fast, right? So getting a
And
couple
that's
zap,
why I
zap,
would,
zap of laser goes faster.
yeah, and that's why I would partner if cost and like Michaela once again, like if cost or price is not an issue for the person, that's why I'd partner at the same time. I will say that when I have a laser in my practice, a lot of times what I will do is I'll start with laser and then give that 3 weeks of shedding. And then that's when we start our electrolysis scheduling. And then basically every 6 to 9 weeks is when I would sprinkle in my next laser at the end of the session of electrolysis, same day. Whatever I couldn't hit with electrolysis would at least get hit with photothermolysis, which is laser, right? And so that's one way to do it. The other, and that would get you in a traditional, like one stop timeline with one modality, is partnering that way. Toggling back and forth with between the two is going to get you to your goals as expected originally. If you do all of your laser first, wait and see what's left over, and then do all of your electrolysis, that is going to be the longest hair removal process you have ever created for a patient or yourself. I mean, and it's silly because you're going to know what the laser can't see 3 weeks after the laser treatment because they're hanging out.
Mhm.
I mean, that's the big part. So I would say that if it's not an issue when it comes to cost, by all means, knock it out with both if they're a candidate. And that's like, I know I keep saying that, but like, that's a huge if. Electrology Education Coalition has a wide variety of home study courses. Want to keep learning on your own time? We have a growing library of home study courses covering advanced techniques, ethics, business planning, and more. Earn CEUs, stay sharp, and continue building your skills. Explore the catalog at electrologycoalition.com. How often do you revisit expectations with a patient?
Every 3 months. Usually it's because that's when we have the conversation about changing the treatment plan. So like if you're coming once a week, then we're usually naturally at a point where we can start stretching it out or reducing the length of the appointment. So any time that we're at that cusp is when we have the conversation about how things are going and how things should look in the future. Right. And so I know that like I can see the results faster than they can because I'm usually staring at it. And, when you stare at yourself, it's kind of like losing weight, right? Like tends to be that other people might notice it a little bit better than you do because you stare at yourself all the time. So sometimes, I don't know. Yeah. Every 3 months, I would say is a good time to revisit expectations and, to have a conversation about the progress.
It's so funny that you said every 3 months because I'm like quarterly. And I was like, well, that's
That's
three.
that's so same.
I've got this. Yeah, I would definitely revisit it at that point. The way I tend to book my patients is I'll book them for that 3
3
months.
months. Hmm.
Um, unless I know that they are going to hold true to whatever I tell them to do. I can usually predict most of the year at this point for that plan. Because it's fairly standardized. I mean, like when you're working on a terminal hair, you know how fast it's growing in. And so I feel like that's part of it. But I whenever they're leaving, I tell them to stop at the front desk to put 2 more on the end.
Hmm.
That's like my thing. I'm like, and I will say that if I have them at a 3-week interval, right, that gives me 6 weeks. And if I decide that like I didn't need that one at 3, I'll drop it out and then I'll see you in 6 and we'll see how much extra hair we had at 6. And then I get to then adjust your further appointments from there.
Hmm.
That's one of my favorite things to do.
I
Um,
opt in to pre-book for like a year
mm,
and I'll do the frequency that we start off with, but then I just edit the reoccurring appointment. And so we can drop one, let's say, like if it's every week, then it can become every 2 weeks. If it's for an hour or 2 hours, it can become 1 hour. So we just kind of adjust the treatment plan based on where we stand.
yeah. I mean, you have to. It's like if you're not modifying, then you're kind of just not planning. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what it comes. Um, I like to think that I try to cheerlead people as much as possible. Um, one of the things that you and I had talked about when we were going over this beforehand was like talking about the self-care and emotional support of things. How do you do that? I mean, like, what is your,
You
are you
know,
there?
I would be
Um,
curious to know if photos were taken, progress photos. I feel like that helps so much because especially a client like her, and I have plenty of those where they're like feeling defeated, like it's not working and this and that. And the best way I have to just like re-encourage them is to really pull up the photos from the beginning. And like I take photos and I say, look at these two, compare these two, and tell me now that this isn't working. Like give it another 3 months and it's going to be half of that. Another 6 months and we're talking you're coming in like once a month. Like you're almost there. So like it's sometimes you need that visual confirmation. And so that's another reason why taking progress photos is so important because sometimes it's not really about like in case I get sued or this and that, but it's also I use it to motivate clients when they just kind of want to be like, it is tiring. I'm sorry, but doing something for a full year, where you're coming in consistently for appointments is hard. So sometimes just a little reminder as to, where you started and where you're at now can really do a lot.
progress photos, even though they're hard to remember to take, They are the
That's
quickest.
my disease. Yeah.
And right, we've talked about that in the past.
Yeah.
It's one of the ones where even after when I moved to Washington, occasionally I would have like my old patients like reach out and they're like, "Oh, hey, Steph, like I was wondering X, Y, and Z," and I'm like, "Did they take progress pictures?" Like because they wanted to know whether or not it's working or what I do. I think that their treatment plan's working. I'm like, I'm not in your chart. I don't know what your plan is right now, but let's go back to this. And so what I would do is I reconnect them with their technician, and I'd be like, "Hey, she needs a motivation boost, right?" Like,
Mm.
and it's like as an employer, as a teacher, as like a person understanding that this process is not fun. So we need to like boost morale every once in a
Mhm.
while.
It was a good question here from Eileen that kind of came through. So, do you book out special time to go over expectations in addition to the regular appointment time? I feel like that should almost become standard for us in order to keep clients on track, build confidence in them, and also keep them honest and compliant with the schedule we set out for them. I do that more for insurance because when we set out for authorizations, I do an evaluation. And so we kind of like, I'm trying, and it's hard to train the staff to do these things. I feel like we're not trained to do the charting and the record keeping that doctors are trained to do. And I know that, Steph and I have been trying to push electrologists to do more thorough consultations and more record keeping and more documenting and, like all these things that we're trying to get the field into doing is kind of incorporating a little bit what Eileen's talking about. I think it would be great that like every 3 months you just do like a 30-minute check-in where you take photos, where you do a reevaluation of the treatment plan, where you kind of chat about what's going on. I mean, why not, right? If it can be all conducive to increasing really the positive results of the whole electrolysis treatment.
I'm going to show you guys another thing. So this is an assignment that all of the Zaplings have to do. They probably hate it. And the ones that are on this call, if you want to drop it in the chat, whether or not you like it or not, that's up to you. But I would definitely say that this was when Eileen, when you asked that question, um, this chart is my evaluation at the start and end of every session. Okay. Now, in this, they're going to be the client findings. So, what they're seeing along the process, the volume of growth that we're seeing in the areas which we're using the Hirsutism score. I am recreating this. I was just talking to the students about this last night. Where was it last night? I don't remember what I was talking about it. Where I am going through and I'm redoing my intake forms. Yeah, that was last night. And it's this is one of the things that I am going to be redoing. Instead of calling it a Hirsutism score, we're going to call it a hair density score. As much as I love the Fairman-Galloway scoring chart, I think that it's a good tool. I care more about what I'm going after, how much I'm going after. And I think that a 1 to 4 scoring, which is pretty average on most Hirsuit scores,
It's
it's limited. It needs more. So I'm going through and I'm taking these images and I'm starting to kind of like create a scoring like scale that's like density by area based on what insurance covers. So obviously there's a lot of random spots that you can add to it, but this is going to be on my intake form, but it's also going to be on my my charts going forward. So like I talk to you guys about like soap notes all the time, but like what is my observation during that time? So before they get like to business that day, we can write these in as they're laying down. I'm going to take this information and I'm going to, before I've ever gloved up, write it all down, hit that hand sanitizer glove up and get to work once I'm done. Assessments, like what am I seeing happening with the skin, right? What did I work today? What are the goals of today? Those are very important to me. I started this because of insurance, but I will tell you I I love it across the board. It's my favorite assignment I've ever created for a student going forward. So like the patient's name, I will go over, there's some adjustments that I've been doing in here, where like, are they being treated within a hormone imbalance? Yes or no? Are they taking contraceptives? or HRT. So like the reason I have this as 2 points, hormone imbalance doesn't necessarily mean that you're on HRT or contraceptives. It just means that like you might be taking spironolactone, which is not HRT, but it is reducing your androgen level. So it's like sometimes people will see this and they're like, oh, well, I'm not on that, but I'm on this. And so it kind of gives us a 2 point. Color of the hairs to be treated in the area that day is what we're talking about. Density, what we're working with. So like vellus, accelerated vellus, and terminal. I was kind of thinking about messing with it and going off of the scale that was in the X's where it was like talking about fat hairs. I thought that was really funny because it was one of those things like, yeah, that's what I call them too. They're thick. We talk about number of treatments. We talk about sequencing of treatments, how they're managing the hair in between sessions. How are they doing that? Write it down, right? Like these are things that have to be done. I'll talk about like if there is an adjustment to their treatment plan, write that on there. And then as I'm bringing this up to my spouse to like chart it all in for me, then he can take that and be like, oh, there's adjustment. She wants to see him every 2 weeks, and that kind of stuff. So these are the things that I do, and they're part of the treatment. So if you book a 15-minute session with me, understand that like during that time, you better be ready to go because I'm going to like knock
How
this.
long do you put between your sessions? What's your buffer?
I prefer 30 minutes, but I will do as little as 15. I just know that if I do as little as 15,
that kind of charting 15 minutes, it's just, especially if you're turning over your own room and doing the checkout yourself, like that's just impossible. That's part of this. Like I've been going back and forth because I really want to incorporate more of this. And I think we're going to do this as a downloadable, right, Steph? So once it's ready to go, by the way, it's going to be a digital download that you'll be able to get through E2C. And so that way you can kind of just, use it ready to go and incorporate it into your practice. But like, I would like to be able to incorporate this, but like, how willing am I to lose an extra 15 minutes after every single appointment? It's like I'm already only at the office, not often because I split my time between so many different things. And then I have all these clients that are wanting to come in and I'm not willing to work a 12-hour day, So it's like I have to try to squeeze them in. And that's what I do now where I'm just running around like a headless chicken. But, like at the same time, it's just, I want to be able to do this properly, to really put the time and the effort to like all the charting, especially with the research project coming up. So most likely,
well, that's actually
have to change
one of the funny things is this. The students have to write it out because it's an assignment. I dictate it into my notes section and I send it over to Mike's computer. And so I'm reading this. I'm not writing it. I'm just using my voice to text because I'm a fast talker. And that's kind of like what I do instead. And I will say, because originally I was in Practice Fusion. They are having so many glitches. So if anybody's asking me again about going into it, they had a whole system down again, and it's like at least once a month. So I was like, no, thank you. So I'm going to be using the same scheduling software as the students, so they can see how I chart it virtually in there, and then basically right into my phone, and I can hold it up to the client and be like, let's talk about this. What are you seeing? Right. And then everything that they say went in there. And so that's kind of how I'm combating that because like you, I don't want to be at the office for 12 hours.
No.
I love what I do. I want to go home though.
But we got to come up with, we try to be, efficient, coming up with new ways to be able to streamline this while also packing, the most amount of information out of, the sessions and everything. So I definitely don't think that charting like that to that extent. I mean, for the students, I get it, but like, I don't think it needs to be done every single session. I think that maybe what would be more realistic is like putting time aside once every 3 months or so to really go through like a good reevaluation. And that would be more doable, I think, and so that way you're not also taking up too much of your time charting, but then getting the information that you need. And so you can do your check-ins.
So there's a question here. So no, the evaluation form you would not order from AEA. It's not an AEA thing. It's a Stephanie Shields creation. And I'm not the EA. I'm E2C. But it'll be an E2C thing. So you'll be able to get it there when the time comes. Hold on, Eileen.
So Eileen was talking about interaction. So we've had 4 interactions of one of these in the school. What do you mean by that? What kind of iterations?
Iterations. 4 versions.
I can't read.
Iterations.
Okay, so you're
Sorry. I
trying
just
to
keep changing. I keep
chart
adding
things.
stuff to it.
Yeah, I know so have we, and that's part of the problem is that why it's not a digital download yet is because we're just like, but what about this? And what if we squeeze this over here? And so it's just, it needs to be perfect, and that's hard.
But your point to doing that, like maybe with that every 3-month consultation, do the full on in-depth thing.
Yeah.
And then in between, just do the shorter notation. That might work.
I think that a treatment note, like I'm going to use Vigaro as an example here because they really have this like just locked down. So Vigaro has a soap note side, and then they have like your treatment notes, your pop-ups, your allergies that you can alert on the other side. I love in that space, my soap note being once a quarter, and then my regular note, whatever happened in that moment, like me going like, okay, is there any changes to this? And then like just dictating that in. The only thing I tend to type in is my levels because my phone dictation has no idea what I'm talking about when I'm like mellow flash or like galvanic. And like all of a sudden my phone's like, what's a galvanic? I'm like, I feel like this is easy enough to know. But that's like the only thing I tend to type in. But if you think about how quickly that can go in there, and sometimes I'll dictate it and then I'll go and correct whatever it didn't. Or laugh at it later going like, what was I talking about? Because I hit save anyway. But that's what I do normally in Vigaro. At the school, we use Fresha. And the reason we use Fresha at the school is it's that every account